Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Always exciting to be back.
So today we're tackling a topic that I think a lot of people might not even know is a thing.
Oh, yeah. This one is kind of a head-scratcher for sure.
It all started with a question from a viewer on a YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
The question was about, those missing books in the Bible.
Yeah, the ones you find in Catholic Bibles.
Right, but not in Protestant ones.
Exactly 7 of them.
7 whole books just gone.
Poof, just like that.
So we're going to dig into this clip from a conversation between scholar Dr. John Bergsma and Catholic commentator Matt Fradd.
They're addressing this very question.
And we'll see what we can uncover about why these books went missing and what it all means.
This is going to take us through a lot of history.
Definitely back to the Reformation, at least.
Even a bit further back, actually.
But before we get too deep into the weeds,
Yeah, good idea.
let's make sure everyone is on the same page.
Sure.
So these 7 missing books, they're officially called.
The deuterocanonical books.
Right. And they include like Maccabees' wisdom.
Obit Judith.
You get the idea.
So why are they missing from Protestant Bibles?
Well, to understand that, we need to go back to Martin Luther and the whole Reformation shebang.
Ah, yes. Good old Martin Luther shaking things up. He had a bit of a problem with the idea of purgatory.
Purgatory.
You know that Catholic belief that after you die, there's this place where souls get purified before going to heaven?
Okay.
And his opponents were using one of those deuterocanonical books, Second Maccabees, to support the idea of purgatory.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Luther wasn't having it.
So wait, he just removed a whole book from the Bible because he didn't agree with what it said.
It does seem a bit drastic.
Indeed.
But he needed to dismantle his opponent's argument.
And I guess getting rid of their source material was one way to do that.
Exactly. But he knew he needed a stronger rationale.
Of course.
So he turned to a couple of sources for backup.
Okay, which sources?
First, he looked to Jewish tradition. Their Bible, which Christians call the Old Testament, doesn't include those 7 books.
Interesting.
And then there's St. Jerome.
Wait, St. Jerome?
The guy who translated the Bible into Latin.
Vulgate, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
But he's like a major figure in the Catholic Church.
He is, absolutely.
So what does he have to do with all this?
Well, in some of his writings, he actually expressed doubts about whether those 7 books should really be considered part of the Bible.
No way.
Way.
Wow, so Luther used this to his advantage.
Big time. He basically said, look, even one of your own saints had doubts about these books.
Clever.
And by aligning himself with the Jewish canon, he was making a statement about authority.
So he's saying the Catholic Church doesn't get to decide what's in the Bible.
It's more like he's saying, let's go back to the original sources.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's the basic gist of why those 7 books are missing.
Okay, but if St. Jerome had doubts about these books, doesn't that mean the Catholic Church was wrong to include them in their Bible?
Well, not so fast.
Oh.
Remember, St. Jerome wasn't the ultimate authority on this stuff.
Right.
The Catholic Church has a whole process for figuring out these kinds of things. And centuries before Luther, there's this other key figure who weighed in on this whole debate.
Who's that?
St. Augustine.
St. Augustine?
Yep, the big-time theologian and philosopher.
Yeah, I've heard of him. What did he say about all this?
Well, he very clearly listed all 7 of those deuterocanonical books as part of the Bible.
So this wasn't just some random Catholic edition like some people claim?
Not at all. St. Augustine's writings are considered pretty foundational to Christian thought in general.
So both Catholics and Protestants respect his views?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay, so that throws a wrench in the whole Catholic edition theory.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity.
So it seems like the history of these books is way more complicated than I initially thought.
Oh yeah, we've only just scratched the surface.
There's a lot more to unpack here.
Absolutely.
Well, let's take a quick break and then we'll dive into some of the specific content of these missing books and see what gems we can find.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to do some digging. So we've got these 7 books, right? The deuterocanonical books.
Right.
And they're full of all sorts of interesting stuff.
Like what? Give us a taste.
Well, for starters, there's the Maccabees.
Maccabees. Like the candle?
No, not the candles.
Okay, good.
These are some pretty hardcore Jewish folks.
Okay.
Fighting for their faith against all odds.
Eggs who?
Oh, you know, the usual suspects, oppressive rulers trying to stamp out their religion and culture.
Sounds like a recipe for some serious drama.
Oh, you better believe it. The books of 1st and 2nd Maccabees are packed with action, rebellion, political intrigue.
So like a biblical Game of Thrones?
Kinda, yeah. Except with more emphasis on faith and martyrdom.
Okay, so less backstabbing, more standing up for what you believe in.
Exactly. And their story has resonated with people throughout history, especially those facing persecution or oppression.
I can see why. It's
Yeah.
inspiring stuff.
Definitely makes you think about what you'd be willing to fight for.
It also makes me wonder
Just that.
if having these books in the Catholic Bible might have shaped their views on things like revolution and resistance.
Ooh, that's an interesting thought.
I mean, if you're reading about these guys fighting for their faith against a powerful empire,
Mm-hmm.
it might make you more inclined to stand up to authority yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's hard to say for sure, but those stories could definitely have had an influence on Catholic thought and action throughout history.
It's like these texts plant a seed in your mind.
And those seeds can grow into powerful ideas and movements.
Exactly. Now, what about that other book we mentioned?
Which one?
The Book of Wisdom. Sounds so intriguing.
Ah, yes. The Book of Wisdom. It's a bit different from the Maccabees.
How so?
Well, it's less about action and adventure,
Okay.
and more about contemplation and reflection.
So more philosophical.
Exactly. It dives into those big questions about life, the universe, and everything.
The meaning of life, good and evil, that kind of stuff.
You got it. It's a deep dive into the nature of wisdom itself.
So not just practical advice like a stitch in time saves 9.
Not quite. It's exploring wisdom as a divine attribute, something that comes from God and connects us to a higher reality.
Wow, that's pretty heady stuff.
It is. It's not for the faint of heart, but for those seeking a deeper understanding of God, the world, and their place in it.
Mm-hmm.
The Book of Wisdom can offer some profound insights.
It makes me wonder if maybe Protestant Christianity is missing out on something by not including these books.
Perhaps. It's like reading a novel but skipping entire chapters.
You might get the general plot, but you miss out on all the nuances and depth.
Exactly. Those deuterocanonical books add another layer to the whole biblical tapestry.
They offer a different perspective, a way of seeing things that you might not get otherwise.
And that's valuable whether you're Catholic, Protestant, or anything in between.
Absolutely. So for our listener who's hearing about these books for the first time,
Yeah.
what would you say is the most compelling reason to give them a read?
Good question. I think it's the opportunity to expand their understanding of the Bible and the wider Judeo-Christian tradition.
To see things from a different angle.
Exactly. These books challenge our assumptions and invite us to engage with Scripture in a more nuanced and comprehensive way.
They're like a window into a whole other world of biblical interpretation.
A world that has been largely overlooked or dismissed by many.
But a world that has a lot to offer nonetheless.
Absolutely. So if you're looking for a new perspective on faith history and the human condition, I highly recommend checking out these missing books.
You might be surprised by what you find.
I think a lot of people would be. So yeah, that's a bit about the content of these books.
Fascinating stuff.
Now let's shift gears a bit and consider the impact of Luther's decision to remove them.
Okay, so we're moving from the what to the so what.
Right. Because this decision wasn't just about 7 books. It had a ripple effect on the entire landscape of Protestant Christianity.
How so? Okay, so Luther takes these 7 books out of the Protestant Bible. Big deal, right?
Well, yeah, it's a pretty significant move.
But how did this one decision affect Protestant Christianity as a whole?
It's like a domino effect. You remove these books, and it sets off a chain reaction that impacts everything from theology to biblical interpretation.
Give us some specifics. What exactly changed?
Well, for starters, it changed how Protestants viewed the relationship between the Old and New Testaments.
Okay.
Without those 7 books, the Protestant Old Testament became more aligned with the Hebrew Bible.
The one used by Jewish communities.
Exactly. And this had a big impact on how Protestants interpreted prophecy, for example, or how they understood the continuity between the 2 testaments.
So it's not just about the content of those 7 books themselves.
Right. It's about how their absence changes the whole framework of biblical interpretation.
I see. And what are other theological issues?
Well, the removal of certain passages also contributed to the Protestant rejection of purgatory.
We talked about that earlier.
Right. And it reinforced the idea of salvation by grace alone.
So Luther's decision had a ripple effect on all sorts of core Protestant beliefs.
Exactly. And these changes continue to shape the differences between Catholic and Protestant Christianity today.
It's amazing how one decision can have such far-reaching consequences.
History is full of those kinds of turning points.
But amidst all this division and disagreement,
Yeah.
Are there any signs of common ground emerging?
Well, there's been some movement within Protestantism.
Oh, really?
In recent decades, some scholars and denominations have started to revisit those deuterocanonical books.
Interesting. They're taking another look at the books Luther rejected.
Exactly. They're acknowledging their historical and literary value, even if they don't give them the same level of authority as the rest of the Bible.
So it's not a complete reconciliation,
Not yet, at least.
but it's a step towards greater understanding and dialogue.
Absolutely. It shows that even centuries later, we're still wrestling with these questions of what belongs in the Bible and why.
And it reminds us that the Bible isn't some monolithic, unchanging text.
It's a living document full of complexities and interpretations.
A text that continues to challenge and inspire us centuries after it was written.
Exactly. So for our listeners who may be new to this whole debate about those missing books,
What's the key takeaway you'd like them to remember?
I'd say approach the Bible with an open mind and a willingness to explore different perspectives.
Don't be afraid to ask questions and challenge your own assumptions.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe this deep dive will spark a curiosity in some of our listeners.
To check out those deuterocanonical books for themselves.
I hope so. There's a lot of wisdom and beauty to be found in those pages.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
It's been a fascinating journey.
But we leave you with one final thought to ponder. What might those missing books reveal about the richness and diversity of the biblical tradition?
And how can exploring those different perspectives enrich our own understanding of faith in Scripture?
Until next time, happy reading, everyone.